What a difference it makes when we listen. Actually listen. Thousands of heart-rending, vile stories have been aired at the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sex Abuse, established by former Prime Minister Julia Gillard. Assault, rape, beatings, shame, cover-up, police inadequacy and ignorance, poor mental health, suicides, a stubborn, ugly insistence on defending institutions' reputations, our legacies, lives destroyed, families gutted, decades blotted with gut-wrenching pain. So much important, painstaking, difficult work remains to be done. But thank God we have at last listened to the survivors of child abuse. Will we now listen to the survivors of domestic abuse? We have now recognized abusing a child is a criminal activity, not just kiddie fiddling from a perv. Now we need to recognize assaulting and raping a wife or partner is also criminal, not a domestic, a private matter to be hushed up with counseling and dismissed as marital problems. A crime, and, more often than we realize, child abuse and domestic abuse exist in the same families. One thing that has stunned me in the reporting I have done this year for the ABC on domestic violence and religion, Islam, Protestantism, Catholicism, with Hinduism and Judaism next to come, is how many of the men who abuse their wives also abuse their kids, the discovery of which often serves as the trigger for women to leave. This aligns with the body of evidence that suggests the presence of one kind of violence in a family may be a strong predictor of the presence of another kind. One British study of 20 mothers whose partners had sexually abused their children found that domestic abuse was also occurring in every single case. An earlier study of 206 child abuse cases in Australia found that domestic violence existed in just under half the cases of sexual abuse. Then there are those Adam M. Tomiso calls the forgotten victims of family violence, the poor kids who witness it. The ABS's 2012 Personal Safety Survey found 54% of women who experienced violence at the hands of their partner had kids in their care, and 31% said their children saw it. An earlier study found almost a quarter of young people aged 12 to 20 had seen violence against a mother or stepmother. The figure was 42% for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander youth. It is now recognized that exposing a child to domestic violence is a form of abuse, both in Australia and globally. Growing up in a home where a mother is abused is dangerous for children, who are at greater risk of being abused emotionally, physically and psychologically. They are more likely to be depressed, anxious, aggressive, fearful, lonely, struggle at school and with friends and take drugs. In other words, the need to protect children is another reason domestic violence should be taken extremely seriously by religious leaders, who have a particularly acute responsibility given the trust placed in them as shepherds of their flock. It is not an abstract issue, but an urgent pastoral, life-threatening one. Drive Michael Salter, Senior Lecturer in Criminology at the Western Sydney University, says the similarities in institutional risk factors for domestic abuse and child sexual abuse are striking: lack of transparency or accountability, decent reporting procedures, gender inequality and an absence of women in the hierarchy, all of which are, as he told my colleague Hayley Gleason, characteristic of how faith communities tend to cover up and perpetuate domestic violence.